Melanie and Ray were like many parents I've known. They had no experience with unconditional love, so they couldn't possibly have given it to their son, Bradley, who was 20 years old at the time I first met him. And they couldn't teach him to be accountable or responsible. They'd never told him no, for example, because they couldn't bear the disapproval he expressed when they tried to modify his behavior in any way. It was unintentional, but Bradley's parents taught him that the definition of love meant giving him what he wanted, a belief shared by a very large and increasing number of children. Now, ignore this kid's age, 20. If your child isn't like Bradley, there's a very high likelihood that he or she will be. So this entire conversation applies to you directly. It's so prevalent. But then Melanie and Ray learned about real love, and as they implemented the principles, they experienced remarkable growth in their marriage and in their ability to love Bradley and teach him to be more responsible. They didn't just give him whatever he demanded anymore. How did Bradley react to this? Not so well. He responded to their efforts with enormous victimhood and anger. His parents were puzzled by this, and Ray said to me, "We're being more loving with him than ever before, so why is he being difficult?" "You didn't mean to do this," I said, "but all his life you have thoroughly trained Bradley that he could have whatever he wanted, that he didn't have to be responsible, that he didn't have to work, that he could manipulate you simply by becoming angry. You taught him that those were the rules of life." Ray got the point, and he said, "And now we've changed the rules, and he doesn't like it." Bingo, exactly. All of a sudden, you're saying that he can't have everything he wants. That's a lie, because all of his life that's been true. He can't have what he wants, everything. He has to be responsible. He has to work, and you won't be manipulated. He doesn't see that you're trying to help him be responsible and happy. He believes that you're being unkind and cheating him of what is rightfully his. Under the old rules, true. He believes that you have no right to change the rules. It's all just terribly unfair. Ray said, "Yeah, he uses that word a lot, unfair." Surprise. And I said, "The truth is, what you're doing now is right and fair and loving. Previously, you were teaching him principles that don't work. All these years, you've just been wrong." Ray said, "We tried telling him that, and he flew into a rage." Yeah, children who are raised to feel entitled and to act like victims are almost never grateful when you introduce real love, which includes the teaching of responsibility. They don't want to hear that. Entitled children have a great racket going, and now you're disrupting the whole system of trading. Not long after I talked to Ray, Melanie told me that she had written Bradley to ask whether she should come by his apartment to give him his birthday present, or whether he would prefer to come over to their house to get it. Sounds pretty innocent, yeah? He responded by text, which she read to me. Bradley said, "I hate it that you're forcing me to tell you this." That's never a great introduction. And I said, "Melanie, I don't even need to." But she continued to read his message. And he continued, "But I just have to cut you two out of my life." I always chuckle when I hear this because he's going to cut him out until he needs something. So I said to Melanie, "So right off, he's giving you a knockout blow. I have to cut you out." And he's hoping that you'll be impressed by that. He's been having little tantrums with you from early childhood, and even more lately as he's tried to get you to change the rules back to the way they were, the rules that he liked, the rules that allowed him to have whatever he wanted. He's pouted, shouted, and withdrawn. But all that manipulation hasn't worked. So here's his ultimate threat, his weapon. "I will cut you off. Actually, I will cut you up." He knows that you're afraid of his disapproval. So he's sure that this ultimate withdrawal of his approval will bring you back to your senses. Also notice that, again, he's not making a conscious, rational decision. No, he says he has to cut you out. Forced to. It's not his fault. He has no choice. This is how victims speak and behave. It's their standard language. Bradley continues, I'm not going to tell you why I'm doing this, because you would just tell me that you're trying to love and teach me and all that real love stupidness. And I said to Melanie, he's not going to give you his reasons because he's lying on the floor, having a tantrum, and that behavior is pretty impossible to justify reasonably while you claim to be an adult. He's telling you that there's no way he's going to give up his victimhood or his lack of responsibility. And if he dismisses unconditional love as stupidness, then he doesn't have to pay attention to anything you say or the principles that you teach. Bradley continues, I know you and Dad think you're happy. He's not going to just attack them for parenting. He's going to attack them personally. You're just fooling yourselves. Victims are never wrong. Everybody else is wrong. They have to be. If you admit that you're wrong, you can't claim to be a victim. For Bradley, as with all victims, the definition of right means giving him what he wants. And if you refuse to do what's right, according to that definition, you are wrong and couldn't possibly be happy. If a victim is unhappy, he will make sure that everybody close to him is unhappy too. In fact, including sometimes people far away. Bradley says, I didn't want this to happen. Again, notice, things just happen to victims. They never have any responsibility for what occurs. Bradley says, but I just don't know you anymore. He's also a pretty good dramatist. He's finally speaking something close to the truth now. He really doesn't know you. You've learned some true principles and changed your lives. And that's very confusing to him. He's still a 3-year-old. Of course, he didn't really know you before either, but at least he knew how you'd react to his manipulations. Now he doesn't. This is awful. Melanie says, so what am I supposed to do now? After all that, do I take his birthday present to his apartment? No, you don't. He's having a tantrum specifically so you will pay more attention to him. That's the purpose. His life revolves around manipulating people to get what he wants, which makes real love impossible. So you don't want to go back to that. Melanie says, it sounds like you're suggesting that now he's cut us off, we'll be cutting him off in return. It feels like revenge. Yeah, I see how it could look like that, but you're not cutting him off. You're simply choosing how and when to love him. You're making your own choices about what loving looks like, rather than rewarding his manipulations and being his slaves. He defines your love as you being his slaves. You're choosing, no, I don't think we'll do that. If you take his gift over now, immediately after his threatening message, he'll regard your behavior as a direct response to his threat. So you'll be teaching him, again, that all he has to do is throw a fit and he gets whatever he wants. Melanie said, so what do I do now? Love him. Unconditionally and in a gradually increasing way. He's made it quite clear that he doesn't want you to teach him responsibility. And at his age, he has a right to make that choice. At age 20, he's not really obligated to listen to a word you say. So for now, you only love him gradually in a way you choose so he doesn't feel like he's manipulating you for the attention you give, because you're giving him what you choose, not what he's demanding. And you take it slowly so he doesn't feel like you're desperate for his approval. Take your time. Another reason to go slowly is so he doesn't feel like you're entirely ignoring his command to get out of his life. You're saying, no, we choose not to do that. You're choosing how to love him. So to be specific, how does this look? Every few days, just text him. Be casual, but endearing. You might, for example, text him saying, just thinking of you, Mom. Now, he'll spit on that, but see, you're choosing how to love him. Email him, but not too often, so that you're not clinging. Send him a small gift in the mail, not the birthday present. No, he's already given that up because he's demanded it. Whatever, each message and each act is just another way of saying, I love you, in a way you choose. 2 weeks later, after my conversation with Melanie, Ray called me and he said, Bradley texted to say that his rent and car payment are past due. I had to stop myself from falling on the floor. I said, I'm sure they are, because he wouldn't pay them. Ray said, so what should we do? I said, you do anything you want. But didn't Bradley say that he'd cut you off? Did I miss that? Ray said, no, you're right. He cut us off. So now he wants to cut you off, but not your money. Do I have that right? Ray said, it does seem a little strange. And I said, more like insane and insanely selfish. He said, agreed. So if I refuse to pay his rent and his car payment, won't he think that I'm punishing him? Yep, probably he will. He's a victim. He'll take everything as either being rewarded for being a victim, as you being his slave, or he'll feel like you're punishing him. So don't worry about that. Your only responsibility is to be sure that you are not angry as you cut off the rent and car payment. If you understand that what you're doing here is loving, you will know that you're not punishing him, but he may not. Ray said, I don't quite understand, as most parents would. So I continued, so far, Bradley has not learned to be responsible, mainly because you haven't taught him that principle. All this really isn't his fault. But you have an opportunity now to possibly teach him something, and he can refuse, but you don't have to pay for his faulty life education. The essence of responsibility is that when you make choices, you also take upon yourself the burden of the consequences of those choices. That's what all adults do. I choose to drive too fast. I chose to get the consequences, a ticket, a wreck, or whatever. We pay the price for our choices. Agreed? And Ray said, well, yeah, sure. See, but with Bradley, that got all screwed up. You've let him make his own choices, but then you have paid the price for his choices. You let him pick his own apartment, for example, and buy a car, but then you paid for them. That's the opposite of being responsible. I mean, the dead opposite. So now you're finally going to teach him that he's responsible for his choices. And one way to do that is to let him pay his own rent and make his own car payments. Or he can give those up. He can get rid of his car. He can walk. He can get a bus to work when he says, well, then I won't have a car. Yeah, that would be true. That's true for all adults who don't make their car payments. Welcome to life, baby. And will he feel punished? Yes. But you're not going to be angry, so you won't feel punishing. Just because he tells you that you're punishing him doesn't mean you are. So he might get a bus to work. He might need to get a smaller apartment. He might have to get a room. He might have to stop smoking weed because it costs money. Imagine, you won't agree to fund his weed habit while he doesn't work anymore? How cruel. No, wrong. It's just teaching him, here's life. These are all principles he needed to learn long ago. His cutting you off, however, is a perfect opportunity for him to learn the price of making certain choices. He's declared his independence, and financial independence is part of that. Ray said, this could be pretty great then, actually. Yeah, far from revenge. You're finally loving and teaching your son, but that doesn't mean he'll appreciate it. He's fighting you because he doesn't want to learn these lessons. He wants you to take care of him, pay attention to this, as though he were still a small child. He wants the responsibility of a child, but the choices and privileges of an adult. We don't get to do that. It doesn't work in life. You can get away with it if you have an indulgent parent, but you're going to pull out of that game now. Our children have tantrums specifically so that we will not bother them with the inconvenient lessons of life. How to be responsible and loving, for example. If these tantrums make us uncomfortable, we'll stop teaching the lessons and everybody loses. If we're not willing to allow our children to experience some discomfort now, they are guaranteed to experience a great deal more pain later and longer. It takes courage and faith to be a real parent, and we have to be willing to pay that price if we really want our children to be happy, rather than just entertained and pampered. It's a lesson we can learn and a lesson we can teach our kids.